Welcome to the Nerdstalgic podcast with your host, the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm.
Howdy beans, and welcome to the Nerdstalgic podcast with me, your host Luke, the human. Hope you're doing well, hope you're good, as per usual. Now, today I might disappoint a few people, because it's not going to be a main quest episode today. It's going to be a side quest. Simple reason is I've been really busy this week. I haven't had much energy, I haven't had a lot of time to really invest myself into the actual topic that I had planned for this week. So I won't spoil it here, but that topic will become next week. As for this week, I decided I was going to do something short. I didn't want to leave anybody high and dry. I didn't want to skip a week. So I figured I'm going to do a shorter episode doing a book review, because I want to do more book reviews, to be honest. I am an avid reader. I've only done a few book reviews here and there through season 1 and so far through season 2. The last one I did was this sort of deep dive look into the Bioshock prequel novel, Bioshock Rapture, which again, if you haven't checked out that episode, go back and check it out. But I've never really, I haven't done enough as I would like, to be honest. I want to do a lot more. So I figured, why not start here? It's a shorter episode that sort of tides you through till the next topic, but also it allows me to really sort of start doing more book reviews. Now, not every book that I read will I say is worth either writing a review for or even talking about in a podcast form, because I do read a lot of books, and I read a lot of random books. So I'll only really be choosing the ones I feel like people will mostly enjoy. Like, for example, during season 1, I reviewed the Zombie Survival Guide book by, I think it's Max Brooks, Mel Brooks' son. And that went really well, and people really seemed to enjoyed it. So I want to do a lot more sort of weird, wonderful, strange books that sort of either catch my eye or I feel like people would enjoy here. So that's sort of the main thing that I want to do when I review sort of books. I'm not going to sit here and just, read books and tell you like, oh, you should go read Stephen King's The Talisman. It's a fantastic book, but like, I'm not going to do those sort of run-of-the-mill sort of the books everybody does. I'm going to do sort of not the obscure, the not so popular sort of books, because I'll be honest, in terms of my reading, I don't like. Well, in terms of anything, really, if there is a book or a movie or a game or a TV show that is really popular that I'm interested in, the more people talk about it, and the more people post about it, and the more that it gets traction, the less I actually want to experience it. Like, for example, The Witcher. I haven't read any of the Witcher books yet, which they're on my list, and I will get around to those. But I was a big fan of the Witcher games. I loved them. I played The Witcher 1. I played The Witcher 2 on the Xbox 360. I loved them. Nobody really knew who CD Projekt Red was. Nobody knew who Geralt of Rivia was or what a Witcher was. It was a very niche, very small, sort of nerdy thing, and I loved it, right? And then The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt came out. And don't get me wrong, that game's incredible. It's a masterpiece. And no wonder it sort of exploded and is such a popular franchise even now, and why it put CD Projekt Red on the map. But for me personally, I was very much the vein of, people now normal people know about it, and now they're going to ruin it. And they didn't ruin it. It was just more just the fact that because it became popular, I became less interested in it. And that's just the way I am. I don't know why. But the more popular something is, I'm not one of those people that goes, yay, my favorite thing is now popular. I'm like, it's no longer niche. No, I can't. It's like there's no longer smaller groups of people that you can get really nerdy about with it. You've now got to talk to people at work about it, and it's like, I don't want to get too nerdy. I don't know. Maybe it's me just being silly, but it's one of those sort of things that I don't tend to read books that are incredibly popular or doing well. Even if I want to read them, I would rather leave them for a year or two till the dust settles, till everybody stopped hyping them up and reviewing them and posting about them and all that. Then I'll come back to them and I'll be like, now the dust is settled, I will check them out and I'll see if they are as good or as bad. I will finally jump in and enjoy it. And that's how I do with most things, to be honest. Like, for example, Stranger Things was another one. I started Stranger Things season 1. I loved it. Then it started getting a lot more mainstream and I pulled back. And it took me a year until I actually got around to watching the last Stranger Things season, because everybody was so hype and talking about it. I just kind of, it put me off, So that's how I'm going to basically structure my book reviews. They're going to be books that are not overly popular. They're most likely to be video game books. They could be Doctor Who. I want to look into. I might even do a few Terry Pratchett here and there. Um, I haven't really planned it out yet. I've got loads of books around me, tons that I've completed. I might even go back to books I've already read and I just want to talk about. I've done graphic novels in the past. I find graphic novels are a bit difficult to do because it is a very visual based, and doing it on an audio platform is quite difficult. So maybe I'll leave them until I get a video camera and then I start doing videos on YouTube. And we could do those there, but most likely it'll just be sort of standard word based sort of books. But today I'm going to be looking at Mortal Engines by Philip Reeves, which came out in 2001. But before I do, one thing I want to mention, because I've already gone too far ahead, but I'm going to have to put it in anyway. If you want to be updated on anything that I'm reading or any topics that I'm doing, or anything that I'm playing, watching, or anything that jazz, make sure to follow me on Twitter at Nerdstalgic_pod. I'm almost at 1,200 followers. I'm currently, I think, on the top of my head, I think I'm at 1,194, I think. Yeah, that sounds about right. I don't know. I'm really close anyway. So follow me on there for updates, and it would really help me if I manage to get to that goal, really, really early. Also, if you listen to this on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that jazz. It really, really helps out immensely. I'm currently at 83 subscribers and growing very, very quickly. So I will be over the moon if you would do me the honor of just subscribing. It would really, really appreciate it. I'd appreciate it greatly. Right, so now that's us out of the way, onto the book review. Now, as I do normally, whenever I review anything, anytime I actually do any sort of podcast, I always write notes. I always have footnotes. I never write a script. I barely really edit it myself that much. I just tend to have a few notes so I can make sure that I hit all the points. With this one, I'm going to be very loosey-goosey. I'm going to be doing it the back the way I did when I first started podcasting, which sometimes ended well, sometimes didn't. We'll see how we go. But I didn't use any notes. I didn't have any sort of script or anything to follow. I just generally I like this thing. I'm going to talk about this thing. And I really enjoy doing that, and I miss doing that. So I feel like with these side quests, I don't really have to plan so much because they're not going to be big, long form episodes. They're going to be shorter, condensed episodes. Even though I talk for England and I waffle and I tend to go longer than I plan. These are meant to be shorter, compressed episodes, and I can't really do that if I'm following a script. So this is going to be sort of off the cuff. So if I do make mistakes or and ah more than usual, I do apologise. It is mainly just me going from one sort of section to the next. So, on to the review. So, Mortal Engines is a young adult science fiction fantasy novel by Philip Reeves, published by Scholastic UK in 2001. The book focuses on a futuristic steampunk version of London, now a giant machine striving to survive on a world that is running out of resources. Mortal Engines is the first book of a series published from 2001 to 2006. It has been adapted as a 2018 feature film by Peter Jackson, though the movie for the movie universe is different from the one of the book. The book won a Nestle Smarties Book Prize and the 2003 Blue Peter Book Award. It was shortlisted for the 2002 Whitbread Award, the 2004 ALA's Notable Books for Children Award, and the 2020 Blue Peter Awards 20th Anniversary Prize. The book I've got in front of me now, it has the badges on front of it, and I don't like it when books come with stickers and badges on the front, especially nowadays. It really annoys me. Anybody who's a book reader here will agree with me. Netflix, I love them, but if Netflix get a hold of a book series that they're going to make into a TV show or a film, you are bound to see it. And they did it with the Witcher books, which really annoyed me. But they put a huge non-peelable sticker on the front of the cover, said, "Now watch The Witcher on Netflix." Like, no, fuck off. Sorry for swearing, but go away. I don't like it. It's the worst when they put stickers on it and you have to carefully peel the sticker off. Because, again, I am a die-hard book reader. I don't like damaging books, and I really don't like it when you have to peel a sticker off and you have sticker residue stuck onto the front of the book. I hate it. I really don't like it. It really pees me off, right? Don't do it. And this book has it. Now, granted, I got it from the charity shop, and it's an old book. And fair enough, it's not a sticker, but it's done in a clever way, and I feel like it sort of improves the cover. I'll post the cover of the book on Twitter, so you can probably have a look what I'm talking about. But it does have the Blue Peter Book of the Year Award 2003 logo on the front, as well as a Gold Award winner for the Nestle Book Prize. So I just wanted to mention that. As for the synopsis, the book is set in a post-apocalyptic world ravaged by the 60-minute war, a global conflict so violent it caused a massive globological upheaval. To escape earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and natural threats, a nomad leader called Nikolai, I've always struggled with this guy, Quackrus, known throughout the Quartlet as Nicholas Quirky and revealed as a deity, installed massive engines and wheels on London, enabling it to be dismantled or eat other cities for resources. The technology rapidly spread and evolved into what is known as municipal Darwinism. Although the planet has since become stable, municipal Darwinism has spread worldwide, becoming scientific progress has almost completely halted, and much technological and scientific knowledge was lost during the war. Old tech is highly prized and recovered by scavengers and archaeologists. Europe, some of Asia, North Africa, Antarctica, and the Arctic are dominated by traction cities. In contrast, North America, often identified as the dead continent due to the extensive destruction it suffered during the war, and the rest of the world is the strongest of the Anti-Traction League, which seeks to keep cities from moving and thus stop the intense consumption of the planet's remaining resources. London is the principal traction city in the novel, which has returned to a Victorian-era society. London's society is divided into 4 major and several minor guilds. The engineers are responsible for maintaining the machines necessary for the survival of London, many of which are found by the Guild of Historians. The historians are in charge of collecting and preserving highly prized, often dangerous artifacts. The navigators are responsible for steering and piloting the course of London. The merchants are in charge of running London's economy. London is officially ruled by an elected mayor. The Lord Mayor is Magnus Crome, who is also the head of the Guild of Engineers. Like most traction cities, London is built on a series of tiers. This encourages the system of social classes, with the wealthier nobles at the top of the city and the lower classes further down. Closer to the noise and pollution of the city's massive engines, atop the whole of London, sits St. Paul's Cathedral, the only building known to have survived the 60-minute war. So that's the synopsis of the first book. It's set in a post-apocalyptic world, set in the far, far future, and it really, really fascinated me when I read this sort of premise. Because I'll be honest, I watched the movie first before I read the book. And what pulled me in for the film was this idea that you have huge cities like London and you have small towns. It's like, for example, a town like Essex, for example. You've got small towns like Essex and Bristol and Birmingham and all that. They're their own little traction sort of towns. But you've got London, which is huge, and it's done on giant sort of tank tracks and big wheels. And it's municipal Darwinism. The bigger fish eats the smaller fish being the smaller towns, the smaller cities. And London comes in, and London's been around England, basically destroying all of the prey that are there. And they've ran out of things to eat in England. So now they have to travel over the Atlantic. Well, what was the Atlantic Ocean is now just a rocky bed, marshy land. They've got to travel across there and across Africa and places like that to find prey. And the simple sort of idea behind that is really fascinating. The bigger fish eats the smaller fish, and these cities where the people live on them, and the people have sort of changed because there was a huge war that devastated Earth. And for me, the whole idea and concept behind that is absolutely fascinating. Because we've seen it many times before in video games and movies, a post-apocalyptic world where people are turning into cannibals, people are going into slavery, we've gone back to the Stone Age, we're now rubbing sticks together, we're no longer technologically advanced at all. We have to start again, if anything. But with this, it's the fact of enough of time has passed, and there is enough old tech that is still around and been salvageable, that the idea of life has changed so drastically, but it's also really recognizable. We never think about putting London on a giant sort of moving platform, but it works, and it's so unique and so ingenious that I just love it. And the movie did really, really well about that, and we'll get to talk about the movie in a minute. But this is what pulled me in for the book. The idea behind these moving cities, and they sadly in the first book you don't see many cities really. London's the biggest city that you encounter, and London is the most focal point of the book. But you also have the other cities as well. You see, if you hear sort of rumbles of other cities of in Antarctica, you have other cities in America, you hear other cities that are big cities that are no longer around, big German cities that have been destroyed. It's absolutely fascinating about these all different things. And for me, I love lore, and when I'm sort of entrenched and sort of pulled into a world, I want to know more about it, and I want to know all about the lore. So when you hear about these other cities that are bigger than London, and London has to hide away from these bigger cities, or you have these cities that are bit like big massive like legendary cities that have been destroyed, like Washington was a huge city that had been destroyed, that sort of thing. Absolutely fascinating to me, and that's what kind of makes me want to read more of the series, because I want to learn more about what happened to these cities. As for the plot, I won't get into it much because I don't really want to spoil it for anybody. But the book starts with the traction city of London chasing and catching a small mining town called Salthook. Tom Natsworthy, a teenage apprentice historian, is sent as punishment for skipping a chore to the gut of London, which is kind of the underbelly, where all the engines are and where all sort of the poorer classes live. Were captured during traction cities or towns are stripped of resources. Tom incidentally meets the head of the Guild of Historians, Thaddeus Valentine, along with his daughter Catherine. One of Salthook's residents, teenager Hester Shaw, attempts to assassinate Valentine, but Tom interferes and chases her as she reveals a disgusting scar on her face and claims Valentine caused it. Before escaping the London police through a chute, when Tom informs Valentine of her name, Valentine pushes him down into the chute. Tom and Hester recover outside of the city within the hunting grounds, and after an argument, they start following the city tracks to reboard London. And so the adventure begins. It's fascinating. Really, really, for me, it grips me. Like, I'm already gripped on the idea that these are traction cities, that these are cities that are, how can I explain it? These are cities that are moving, that they're alive. And as I mentioned when I talked about Rapture and I talked about Bioshock, I love the idea of a living, breathing city. This in a different sort of concept, because the city is alive, because as an engine it has wheels, has people running it. But I just love the idea. Then you throw in sort of the sort of assassination attempts, and you throw in actually the people of this world. Absolutely fascinating. You have the two main characters, Tom and Hester. Tom, he's an apprentice. He's never been off London. He doesn't know anything but London. He doesn't know anything but sort of traction cities, about municipal Darwinism. So he's very sort of green to the world. But as a historian, he wants to know more about it. He only really knows what the sort of head historians tell him and what sort of artifacts they bring back that there's been found for the people that, the architects that have left London. So it's that sort of fascinating sort of premise behind it. Then you have this idea of Hester Shaw, and she is somebody who's never lived on a big city. She's a traveller. Something's happened in her past where she's met Valentine in her sort of when she was younger. I won't go into spoilers, but there was a sort of altercation, and it left her a bit disfigured. And she again is now sort of seeking revenge on Valentine. And from there, Tom and again, I'm trying to deliberately be vague because I don't want to spoil anything. But from sort of the events that happen on London, Tom and Hester kind of get stuck together, and then they sort of try to find their way back to London. Tom wants to get back to London because it's his home. He's never been outside of London. He doesn't know how to survive, not an attraction city. He's not used to constantly moving, and especially like using his legs to walk and that sort of thing. Then you have Hester, who she wants to get back because she wants to kill Valentine. So they all have different objectives. But as the story goes on, you have this sort of, I don't know how to explain it, you have this sort of friendship that starts to grow. And I really enjoy that sort of thing, how Tom doesn't like her at first. He sees her as a bad person. Again, he's been brought up in London. He believes that anybody who doesn't live on Attraction City is like a barbarian, is somebody who is, uncultured, somebody who is not the sort of person you want to be around or sort of hang around with. So to meet sort of Hester, who is used to living off the land, who's used to not living on a city, who's used to not hearing the hum of the engines. It's that sort of dynamic that's, again, very, very different and very interesting. But as the story progresses, it's comes apparent that they're not too different. That they both sort of, for example, they both don't have parents. They're both sort of orphans. That they both, believe it or not, have the same sort of goals. That not just want to get back to London, but as sort of Tom learns more about Valentine's and Valentine's history is more sort of brought to the reader, Tom basically realizes that he's not as sort of a god, a deity, as a legend as he remembers. As again, as he becomes more closer and friends with Hester, that he actually realizes that Hester is actually on the right and that she is now his friend, that he now wants to help her a lot more. And I like that. I think it's a healthy sort of relationship, sort of friendship that sort of grows here. I did write a review for this book, and I posted it on Goodreads. If anybody has Goodreads, you can add me on there if you wish. But this is basically my review that I wrote. I go, the ideas and concepts here are completely original and fascinating to me, the likes I've never seen before, and it's that you look for when reading something new. The idea of multiple Darwinism, that the smaller fish gets eaten by the bigger fish, or in this world, the smaller town gets eaten by the bigger town, cities like London, is completely fascinating to me. But as Qui-Gon Jinn so rightly put it, there is always a bigger fish, and food, resources, and prey is dwindling, so London must go hunting if it wishes to survive. Honestly, the concept there is worth the price of admission alone, and kept me interested till the end, and I found myself really enjoying what was here. But, and this is a big but, there was a few things that kept it away from that legendary 5-star rating. Now, I gave it a 4-star rating on Goodreads. I'll explain those reasons why it didn't get the full 5 stars now. Number one, the constant bullying of Hester Shaw. In this book, there is loads of bullying. Like this, Hester, she gets bullied a lot, and I'll go into a bit more detail about that in a minute. Now, it is let on early in the story that Hester's face is horribly disfigured due to an attack when she was younger, which that's fine. It's part of the character, part of the backstory. You know, it makes sense. It's all there for a reason, right? And you'd think once it came up once, it wouldn't matter so much, and everyone would only bring it up a few times maybe, and they'd kind of let it go, and you'd get on with the story. But everyone brings it up constantly throughout the story, and Hester is never allowed to defend herself, and no one ever comes to her defense, not even Tom. And he's meant to be her best friend, and he does it the most. He's the one that constantly picks on her the most, the way she looks. And I don't like how Hester is never allowed to defend herself, because again, I don't want to spoil it, but as I mentioned, Hester did get into a bit of a kerfuffle when she was younger. Her face was heavily disfigured, so she kind of has to wear a scarf over her nose to kind of hide sort of this disfigurement on her face. And you know, that sort of makes sense. It's her character development. It gives her a reason to want to sort of get revenge, and the reason why she is what she is, and why she's very sort of solid and very sort of not caring about the world and that sort of thing, because she doesn't, you know, she's a woman on a mission. She doesn't care how she looks. She's just, you know, my main goal is to take out the people that sort of did me wrong when I was younger. And that bit's fine, you know, it's character development, you know, I understand that. But what got on my nerves and what really sort of peed me off was the constant bullying of like every character that ever sort of saw her, even the characters that already knew her, always mentioned of like, oh, you seen her face, or look at her face, oh, isn't she ugly, isn't she disgusting? Why would you want it? Like, you'd have characters that would go to Tom, why would you want to be going traveling with a girl like her? She's disgusting. Why don't you come with me, and we'll check out these girls over here. And it really annoyed me. And I was like, what's the need for this bullying? Like, I get it, we're in the far future, but you know, leave the girl alone. And the worst part is, you know, you have all this constant bullying, this constant picking on Hester and the way she looks and her deformity. And never once is she allowed to defend herself. Never once is she allowed to go, well, actually, you know, I was attacked when I was younger. This is why I have this deformity. Or just be like, you know, tell people to piss off. You know, some sort of like backlash, some sort of stance of like, you know, leave me alone sort of thing. But never, she's never once allowed to defend herself. And that really angst me. I just felt like that wasn't fair, because she's a wonderful character. She's a fascinating character. And I don't feel like she should be belittled because she has a disfigurement. I just don't think that's right. It feels a bit ableist. It feels a bit unfair to me. Especially Tom, who's meant to be, you know, I'm introduced to Tom. He's meant to be Hester's best friend. He's meant to care for Hester. He's meant to be there for her. You know, he and her are the two main characters you read about the most and sort of go on this journey with through the story. You'd think, yeah, okay, when he first meets her, he's never seen somebody like her before. He's never seen somebody who's had a disfigured face before. Again, fair enough. Okay, maybe for a chapter or two, as he sort of travels with her, he mentions it once or twice. But you'd think he'd get a bit more mature as he gets to know her, as he becomes more friendly with her. That disagreement doesn't matter, and it's like, you know what, I'm not going to mention it. She's my best friend. I love her. I'm not going to sort of bring it up anymore because, as you would if you was a friend, you're not going to because it doesn't matter because friendship is stronger than the way somebody looks, right? But he does. He constantly mentions it as through the story, and he eggs people. He did well. He doesn't stop people. When people say it to him, he doesn't go, "Well, that's not very nice. You shouldn't say that. She's my friend." He just sits there and goes, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. I know." So that's something that really aches me. So that's one thing that really bothers me. It might not bother you if you read the story. It might not be something that comes up and really sort of bothers you that much. But for me, it was something that I just stopped it from getting the full 5-star rating. Also, number two, the forced romance. Please stop the forced romance. I'm no Scrooge. I don't mind a bit of love in a story. But when you hit me with the high concepts this book represents the reader, with the idea of adventure and mottos for Darwinism and big cities on tracks, once you've given me that sort of thing, that's all I really want. That's all I want to see. That's all I want to hear about is adventure and these big cities and sort of everything else that happens in the story. That's all I want, right? But when you are trying to force a love story where it doesn't need to be between Tom and Hester, that's annoying. And obviously, I'll get onto that in a minute. But just keep them as close friends. That's all they needed to be. They just had to be close friends, and that was fine. That works perfectly for them and for the story. But I worry they are going to be made to fall in love in the next book, in the rest of the series. Which annoys me because Hester deserves so much better than Tom. As I mentioned, the whole bullying where Tom sort of, again, for the most part of the story, he is sort of thinking about or even mentions her disfigured face and how ugly she is and all this and that. And I'm like, how, as a reader and as the author, as the writer, how did the writer think that if he's going to sit here and constantly belittle and badger Hester's looks and have the main character, Tom, do it all the time as well and sort of go with it when everybody else will say it, not defend her, how would you expect to come to me, the reader, and be like, oh, they love each other, and Tom is wants to get with her and wants him to be his girlfriend, and Hester falls in love with him? Like, how could you have that sort of concept when all you've shown me is Tom being horrible? Now, Tom is a fan. Don't wrong. I'm making Tom sound really bad. Tom is a character. If you take out the bullying, he's an interesting character. It's a very boy meets world sort of story, very sort of fish out of water, very interesting, very fascinating. He is an interesting character. He becomes out of his shell. He becomes very brave. He becomes very sort of adventurous, and he basically becomes the guy that he wanted to be. Originally, the guy that he'd envisioned and read about in stories and that sort of thing, the proper adventurer, right? You take out the bullying, that's quite interesting, right? But then you add the bullying in, and you're like, I don't believe that Hester, being as smart and as clever as she is, and as wonderful as she is, would fall for somebody like this. She deserves better, and that's why I say, even though he eventually does stop the sort of the name calling and the bullying, eventually, even though that eventually happens, as the story progresses, it goes on for long enough of a time where I just believe now that, it wouldn't work if they were getting into a relationship. I don't believe there's a romance between them. Maybe Hester might fancy him, but I wouldn't believe that he would like her because, again, he's mean to her. Now, again, you can say, oh, he bullied her, because he liked her. I don't believe it at the end of the day, and I don't like it. And I feel like Hester deserves better. She deserves a better bloke. She deserves a better person, and that's why I say, like, they're better off as friends, best friends, close friends, yes, but not romance. And I feel like in the next few books, that's going to be shoehorned in. And if it is, it's really going to put me off. Again, I'm not a Scrooge. I don't mind loving books, but if it's there and it doesn't need to be there, if it feels forced or shoehorned in, then it puts me off. By all means, have a love story and make it make sense, but don't force it in. because I will not believe it, right? So I just hope for the next two books they focus more on the adventure side of things. I want them to be more about the world beyond the traction cities and less about this forced romance that I don't believe at all. So time will tell what they would do with them. So that's been my sort of review on Goodreads of the book. The book sold very, very well. It did really well, high acclaimed. As I mentioned, there are three books, four in total. There's three other books, but there's four books in the series. You have Mortal Engines, then you have The Predator's Gold. Then you've got book 3, which is Infernal Devices, and book 4, The Darkling Plane. All of them reviewed quite well. For example, the first book on Goodreads, it has a 3.76 overall score, and that is from 61,365 ratings and about 6,124 reviews. So it's pretty well high sort of rated, and on Goodreads and books, that's quite well. And there's not many books that actually hit a 4-star rating overall. So a 3 star is not bad. A 3 star in my books is good. A 1 is basically don't sort of waste your time. A 2 star is meh. Meh. A 3 star, it's good. That's about it. It's good. There's not really much more to say. 4 star is great, fantastic, amazing, love it. And a 5 star is a masterpiece. Is visionary. It's incredible. It's changed my whole perspective of my life and all that sort of jazz, right? The other books rated quite well as well. Predator's Gold, Book 2, that got a 3.93 overall rating out of 23,100. Then Internal Devices, that scored a little bit lower but higher than the first book. That got a 3.88 out of 16,000 reviews. And Book 4, A Darkling Plane, that actually got better scores. That was actually a 4.17 out of 12,000 reviews. So overall, they seem to review quite well. So I'm hopeful, shall we say, that the next few books will be interesting. I don't know when I'll get round to reading the next few books in this series, but I look forward to continuing this story. Would I recommend this series to anybody? Yes, I would recommend it. Yes, the bullying might put you off, and the bullying part might be a bit sort of, you might sit there and go, "Oh, I don't like that." But I feel like if you can get over if you can kind of get past that, and you actually sort of embrace it for what it is, the whole sort of multiple Darwinism, the sort of the sort of advanced but not so advanced technology of these sort of moving cities, and sort of the character that is Hester, and like I didn't even mention Shriek yet, the big sort of robot, sort of Terminator sort of bloke that is sort of hunting Hester down. If you can get into all of that, I think you really, really enjoy it. I have been vague, intentionally vague. I've only really spoke about the beginning of the story. There's a lot more to it. They do travel around. You find out that there are cities in the sky, that there are some people that don't want to live on a traction city, and these are the Anti-Traction League. And this is a group of people that I don't like big cities and don't like this whole sort of movable cities because they pump pollution into the air, and that the world's already destroyed as it is. Why should we make it worse? So there's not many resources. Why should we hoard them? Why don't we give them out? So you have this Anti-Traction League that live in the sky. They live in big, massive air balloons, sort of think Bioshock Infinite sort of cities in the sky with balloons and that sort of thing. Absolutely fascinating. That's fascinating. Then you've got like cities like China, for example, that's big hidden behind a big wall, and there's big luscious gardens. It's like a Garden of Eden, that sort of thing, and it's really, really fascinating in these high concepts. And I hope again the next few books we explore more of these places. We find more cities, either derelict or not so derelict. We see how other people lived in other towns, and bigger cities. How does a bigger city survive without less prey? You know what I mean? Because there are a lot of cities. Like, you've got cities that move, you've got traction cities, then you've got standard cities that don't move, that are that basically tried to move, ran out of resource, ran out of fuel, and just stopped dead. And then people just started lives there, just kind of hoped, fingers crossed, that the bigger cities wouldn't come across, and bandits and pirate cities wouldn't come and destroy them. So there is a lot to this world, and I think it's quite worth checking out. It's quite fascinating, and like I said, they made a movie out of it. Now I am going to talk about the movie a bit, but overall, as for the book, I would say, check the book out. The bullying part, it might bother you, it might not, but it was something that really ain't to me because I just don't like bullies. I don't like people being mean for no reason, especially when the main character doesn't get a chance to defend themselves. Now, I've been told by my friend that Hester does defend herself more in the next few books. Maybe when this book came out, a lot of people complained about that, so the author decided to kind of, you know, let her sort of defend herself in the next books. I don't know, but it was something that bothered me. But it might not bother you. So overall, I would recommend this book to check it out. Before I end it, before I go, I just want to talk about quickly about the movie that came out in 2018. More Engines is a 2018 steampunk film directed by Christian Rivers with a screenplay by Peter Jackson based on the 2001 novel of the same name by Philip Reeves. Peter Jackson purchased the rights to the book in 2009, but the film languished for several years before being officially announced in 2016. Peter Jackson picked Rivers, who won an Academy Award for the Best Visual Effects for his work on Jackson's King Kong, to make his feature-length film directorial debut with the project, and also brought on several members of his production team from the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit films. Filming took place from April to July 2017 in New Zealand. Mortal Engines had its world premiere on November the 27th, 2018, and was released in Australia and New Zealand in December the 6th, 2018. The film received negative reviews from critics and some praising the visual effects and score, but with most criticising the direction, screenplay and lack of personality. It went down in history as one of the biggest box office bombs of all time, grossing $83.7 million against a production budget of $100 to $150 million, and losing the studio an estimated $175 million. So the movie flopped. It didn't do very well at all. Especially with your budget. Like, let's say, for argument's sake, the movie was made for 150 million and it only made 83.7 million. That's a huge loss in money. Because you've got to remember that money that goes into making films, it's not just the production, it's the visual effects. With this movie is very high on visual effects. It's paying those visual effects artists, it's paying the writers, it's paying the marketing staff, it is paying everybody. So if it can't make that money back, it flopped hard, which is a shame because, again, I haven't read the next few books, but I would have liked to see where this goes more. I feel like this would have been a good. The story works. The idea behind the story works in a good medium where it could have been something special in a film. And again, I watched the movie and I quite enjoyed the movie. I quite liked it, and that's what interested me. I wanted to check out the book originally. But again, these things happen. You do get sort of movies that come out and they do flop, sadly. For example, The City of Ember. I read the book, I watched the film, I loved them both, but the film flopped. So sadly, they never did any more of the books. Inkheart with Brendan Fraser, fantastic book, fantastic film, flopped, didn't do very well. I might actually review Inkheart, the film. I've read the book. I absolutely loved the book. I might review the film because I feel like that's one of those book to movies that kind of was looked over that deserves a lot more love. But it happens all the time, and I've mentioned this a few times in my reviews where you get book to screen. You especially had that renaissance in the early 2000s. Even though I know this came out in the 2010s, you did have that sort of 2000s renaissance because of Harry Potter, where everybody was trying to basically make huge franchises out of books, on the big screen, and some failed and some didn't. Only a few really garnered success. Others really just kind of flopped hard. Twilight and Harry Potter, being sort of a few to mention. But again, this is what happens, they take it. But yeah, I just wanted to mention it. I really enjoyed it. It had one of my favourite actors in it. It had Hugo Weaving in it. Again, Hugo Weaving, in my opinion, is one of the best actors ever to live. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. If you haven't seen the film, I highly recommend checking it out. But yeah, so that's been my review of Mortal Engines. I know it's a bit loosey-goosey. I know I've probably ummed and ahed a bit and I paused a bit longer than I would normally. But I feel like it's more fun. That's how I tend to review books. This is how when people, it's really awkward when friends ask me, "Oh, you read so and so book?" Yeah, I have. What do you think about it? And this is basically how I am. Like, I've got so much I want to say, but it's like I don't want to spoil it. Like, if I could spoil it, I'd have a lot more to say. Like, I wish I could go more into Strike and talking about him. He's like the Terminator sort of side of him. and how he's trying to hunt down Hester and why he's hunting down Hester and how it's slowly drip fed to you throughout the story. I wish I could go into that more, but again, that's sort of like the surprise of the story overall. Also, you've got sort of the stuff about sort of Valentine, who Valentine really is. Also, you've also got the side story that goes on in London with Valentine's daughter and the ventures she gets up to in London. There's a lot going on in this story. For a short story like this book, my edition of the book is only 293 pages long. Now that's short. Most novels are 300 plus. I know it's close to 300, but it's quite a short book. It took me longer to read than normal because I've been very busy lately. But it's a short book. But for a short book, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of ideas and concepts in this world that I've never seen before that are incredibly fascinating. There's a lot of story threads. There's a lot of stuff that happened in the past, and there are a lot of stuff that's going off. Pardon me. Sorry, I do apologise. Hope you didn't hear that. I just burped. Do apologise. But I'm going to keep that in the edit. That's just funny. Because who doesn't love burps? But there's a lot going on in this story that keeps you interested. There are a lot of sort of characters. You have Hester, you have Tom on their adventure, you have Valentine on his adventures, you've got Shrike on his adventure, you've got Katie on her adventure and what she gets to and all that. So there's a lot going on for such a short book. And for me, being a book reader, granted, you take away the things that I didn't enjoy, there's enough here for me where I would be like, I'll happily read the sequel. And hopefully I would hope that the sequel would improve on what was already here, would sort of take me to new places, and I hope it does. Now, granted, I don't know when I'll get round to the second book, but I am looking forward to it. But again, I really, really hope you enjoyed this review. I hope I've inspired you to pick up this book, to check it out. It's fun, it's interesting. It's big, it's brave, it's brilliant. So it's worth giving it a go. I guess it's an early 2000s book, but check it out. So that's been me. I'm your host, Luke. Thank you for listening to the Nerdstalgic podcast. Thank you for listening to this side quest. Again, I feel like I've ran over longer than I'd planned. These are really meant to be 30 to 35 minutes long, and I've just done 40, soon to be 42 minutes. But this happens when you talk about stuff you love. But thank you very, very much for listening. I do appreciate it. I promise that a bigger, longer, more sort of structured episode will come next week. But for now, enjoy this little sort of loosey-goosey side quest, and I hope to see you next week. So, as always, bye-bye.